In this video, we're going to talk about flow, and I already covered the basics of how flow works. It's basically this matching between how difficult is the problem and how good are you at solving that type of problem. So somebody may be in the flow doing really well solving one type of problem, then you throw them into a different situation, or they're in the same situation but you throw a different type of problem at them, and now they're stuck and they can't do anywhere, they can't make any forward progress, and they fall out of the flow. So the flow is very basic. People get very esoteric about it, they get very spiritual, very woo-woo about it, but it's really very simple. It's just about what is the difficulty of the problem and what are your skills in terms of implementing it. The important thing to understand about flow is that it's the only consistent source of sustainable energy. And the reason why most people don't spend time in the flow is because they're either working on problems they don't care about, or they're doing things where there's not a good match of their skills and the difficulty of the problem. So part of the issue there is that anytime you're working on a problem, you're not just working on that problem. You're actually working on another deeper problem, which is the problem of meeting your emotional needs. So ultimately, everything is just a solution to meeting your emotional needs in one way or another. So whenever you're looking at a problem, there's also that deeper level of, is this solving the problem of I need to consistently have all my emotional needs met at a high level? If that's not happening, then you have a problem. You're not going to feel good. You're not going to feel fulfilled. So that's really the ultimate problem, no matter what superficial or surface level problem you're trying to solve or other people are talking about trying to solve. The real problem is they're just trying to meet their emotional needs, and this is the vehicle that they're using, solving this problem, putting together this table from the IKEA package. That's the problem that they're using to solve the real problem, which is their emotional needs. So you have to understand that distinction. If you're working on a problem that doesn't solve your emotional needs, doesn't fulfill those needs, doesn't meet those needs, then it doesn't matter how good you are at solving that problem or how difficult that problem is. It doesn't matter because it's not meeting those emotional needs. So yeah, it's not just about the superficial, well, what is the problem? It's also about, well, is this problem meeting your needs? So if it's meeting your needs, that's where the energy comes from. Your body is basically a system that works based on meeting those emotional needs. The emotional needs regulate, well, are you functioning at a high level? Are you functioning well as part of a group? But also, are you functioning as an individual? Are you going to be able to get the things that you need to survive? So that's really important. It's really important to understand that. And the important thing with flow is that it needs to be the sustainable source of energy. So somebody who's consistently working in a job or working on a business or working on some side thing where it's not meeting their needs, they're not going to enjoy it, or they've got a conflict between their needs, they're not going to enjoy it. So that's why you have to allow yourself space so that you're not always at capacity or right near being at capacity where 99% of your capacity is used up. It's very hard for you to get into the flow and then allow new things to come into your life that are going to provide sustainable sources of energy. That sustainable source of energy is what you're going to use to power your long-term projects. So you've got to figure out a way to align those emotional needs with the problem that you're trying to solve, that's at that more superficial level of building this business or building out this new division of this company or working on this programming project or whatever. If those things aren't directly linked to building or meeting as many of those emotional needs as possible and at high levels and at higher levels than how you're meeting those needs in other ways, then that's not going to be a sustainable source of energy. This needs to be an option for you. Whatever thing that you're learning, whatever thing that you want to take action on, that needs to be sustainably energized by meeting those 6 emotional needs at a higher level than any other way that you have. So maybe something that could be pretty good, but if you have some other thing that you can go to that's going to consistently meet your needs in a better way, then you're never going to really have that deep level of motivation to work on that project that you're trying to push yourself to take action on, but you just can't quite get yourself to that point. Another thing is trusting your intuition and going with your curiosity. So that's why I titled this Curiosity Powers Action, because ultimately you can get away with doing things the way everybody else does them. But if you want to be a creative genius, or you want to tap into the same sort of stuff that creative geniuses throughout history, people that have achieved, learned, and created amazing things, then you need to learn and work on projects and be motivated to work on projects in similar ways to how they do it. That's why I put this quote in here from Steve Jobs: you can't connect the dots ahead of time. So a lot of the things that he did when he was younger ultimately led him to being able to create Apple and create all the amazing things that he created. Same thing with somebody like Elon Musk. He couldn't have connected the dots beforehand. Sure, a lot of it was planned out, a lot of it was plans or ideas that he developed from an early age, but there were a lot of things that he couldn't have planned out ahead of time. And there's a whole litany of examples of creative geniuses throughout history where they were doing things at a young age that ultimately led them to creating amazing things, but that wasn't their plan, that wasn't their intention. They were just following their curiosity. And the great thing about curiosity is it's going to lead you in a bunch of different directions that at the beginning don't seem to be leading in any coherent new direction. But what ends up happening is that by having that unique combination of skills, you're able to solve problems in a unique way where nobody else is able to do that because they don't have that unique combination of skills. So it's important to trust your curiosity more and more. And this was something that was very difficult for me to do at the beginning, because you always feel like you have some short-term goal that you need to be working towards that's expected of you, where there's something or maybe a lot of things dependent on achieving that. And so it may feel like you don't have a lot of free time to just explore your curiosity, or it may feel like, well, it's not something that I really trust or something that's ever really worked out for me. The problem is the only way to get to that point where you're operating and learning and taking action at the highest level, like the creative geniuses throughout history, is you need to trust your curiosity the same way they trusted their curiosity, which means putting 100% faith in it and taking action based on your curiosity, having faith in that curiosity, even if you're not sure why, even if it doesn't make any sense. Because ultimately, and this is more of a competitive viewpoint on it, and you may not be in this sort of situation where you're competing with other learners or other business people or people in a job, but the way to think about it is, imagine, for example, you had a twin who was an identical twin, and you start off at this exact point of right now, and one twin followed their curiosity and just put a lot of time, a lot of effort and energy into that curiosity, where you just continued doing what you were doing and you really didn't pay much attention to your curiosity. You just kind of let it pass and you didn't do anything about it. Well, that twin who actually did follow their curiosity, they would end up putting in a lot more time learning things and getting into the flow a lot more often, because they were tapping into the power that's behind that curiosity. So ultimately what it's about is you want to get yourself so you're spending more and more hours per day in the flow, where you're fully energized, where you're fully motivated, and you're getting into the habit of taking action. Because over time, you're going to be able to combine those things that you're curious about, but that don't seem to have a lot of practical value. You're going to be able to find ways to bring those back to the problems that you're interested in and that you want to work on and solve, and have some sort of long-term value for both yourself and other people. So following your curiosity is extremely important, because it's going to get you into the flow. And when you get into the flow, you're going to want to take action. When you get into the flow, you're going to want to build things. And that's going to get you started into this new habit of taking action. And you're going to feel good by doing that, because that curiosity is going to eventually lead you to, I want to take this and do something with it. And you get access to a totally different part of your brain, a totally different kind of wavelength of energy when you're in that place. And it's hard if you're not there. I understand if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, that doesn't really resonate with me. I don't feel like that. That's not my day-to-day experience. So if you're there, I understand that. What I'm trying to communicate to you, and it's kind of hard to do because when you may have an experience of you're at a party and you're having a great time, you're just vibing with other people and you feel really good, and then you go back home and you're by yourself, you're on the computer, your brain is in two very different states at those periods of time, and it's hard to just go from one to the other. You kind of have to ramp yourself up, ramp yourself down, go into a different mode. And most people just don't really have any control over that. A lot of that is dependent on other people and on the environment. But you need to get to the point where you're putting yourself into the right mode enough where you can snap back to that whenever you want. So people that spend enough time in any sort of environment or situation, eventually they learn the ability to snap back to that state and get back to that state just whenever they want to, whenever they have the intention to. So at the beginning, you have to do things that don't necessarily make sense long term, but it's like training wheels. In the short term, it limits you. It doesn't allow you to go as fast. It doesn't give you as much flexibility. You can't steer around, go over certain terrain. But in the long term, you take those off and they've gotten you to the point where you need to be. So in the short term, what you do is you over focus on curiosity. You spend more time on your curiosity projects than you probably should. But what that does is it gets your brain used to being in a new mode where you're 100 times or 200 times or 300 times as effective as you normally are. You're coming up with new ideas. You just feel like a better person, like a more productive person, a more active person. You just enjoy learning and working and doing stuff a lot more. And when you get used to being in that place, it starts to become your new emotional home. It starts to become the place where you live, and it almost feels like you're becoming a slightly different person or a slightly more evolved version of your former self. And then you can go back and take that with you and go back to what you were doing before with a totally different mindset, with a totally different feeling about yourself, a supercharged level of energy. And that's the thing that's going to power you to be able to tackle these problems that you're working on from a new perspective and with a new level of energy and curiosity and insight and power behind it. So that's why it's important to follow your curiosity, especially at the beginning. Remember, with all this stuff involved in building these new emotional feedback loops, at the beginning you have to do a lot of work to break the old feedback loop and create the new feedback loop. But once you get it up and running, it's eventually going to become self-sustaining, and you're no longer going to have to worry about the old feedback loop. It's like it never existed. So there's certain things you're going to have to do at the beginning that obviously don't make sense long term. When you do renovations on a building in a city, they put up scaffolding all around that city short term so they can do the fixes. But eventually that goes away. That doesn't stay there forever. So you're going to have to do certain things at the beginning to get yourself primed and in the right place so that you're consistently spending your time in the flow, that those things are not long term. Those are temporary scaffolding. So you have to be willing to make these sacrifices short term to trust things and do things in a different way than you've ever done before. Treat it like an experiment, but during that experiment, play 100%, trust 100%, have faith 100%, and give yourself the chance, give yourself the few weeks to the few months it's going to take to consistently get to a new place where you're consistently in the flow. You can snap into that place when you want. You realize when you're not there, and you know how to change by focusing on what are those emotional needs. Is this superficial level problem meeting those emotional needs? And if it's not, how do I fix things? How do I change things? How do I jiggle with this, rejigger this equation until things are coming out right? And then you're going to get back into that feedback loop, and you're right back into the zone where you need to be. So it's really important to follow the flow. It's very important to follow your curiosity. If you feel like you don't have any curiosity, just stop doing everything you're doing right now and only allow yourself to do new stuff. Eventually something's going to hit you, and then just go 100% towards that and keep going. And that's where it's going to start to build back up. If you spent decades not following your curiosity, it's going to take a few days, maybe even a few weeks of doing this before you just find it. So all of this stuff, if you're not used to doing it, if you haven't done it in a while, it's going to take time to get back there. Expect that. Know that that's going to happen. Just make sure that you push through it and you get to the other side, because it's worth it.